Hello and welcome. I'm so glad you're here. In today's episode, we'll listen to a touching and powerful story called A Moment of Unexpected Kindness. It's a real reminder of how even the smallest gestures can change a life. So, find a quiet space, relax, and let's dive into this beautiful story together. I remember the day with startling clarity, not because anything particularly grand happened, but because of the subtle and profound impact of a single moment of unexpected kindness, a gesture that might have seemed trivial to any outsider but which, to me, reverberated through every cell of my being and changed the trajectory of my life in ways I could never have foreseen. I had been navigating what I then believed to be the nadir of my personal and professional life, having recently been laid off from a position I'd devoted nearly a decade to, my long-term relationship having dissolved in a slow, aching unraveling, and my sense of identity drifting like a ship unmoored, without direction or purpose, and it was during one of those gray afternoons, the kind that feels heavy even without rain, that I found myself wandering aimlessly through the narrow streets of an unfamiliar neighborhood, my thoughts swirling in a vortex of what-ifs and should-haves, and I stepped into a small, almost invisible coffee shop tucked between a boarded-up bookstore and a dry cleaner with flickering neon lights, seeking nothing more than warmth and a momentary reprieve from the oppressive internal monologue that had become my constant companion. The cafe, dimly lit and warmly perfumed with the mingling aromas of roasted beans and vanilla, was nearly empty save for a barista who offered me a smile that didn't feel rehearsed or obligatory but rather genuine, a quiet welcome that, in my fragile state, felt like a lifeline thrown into turbulent seas, and as I fumbled for change in my coat pocket, embarrassed to realize I had only enough for a small black coffee, she simply waved her hand and said, "It's on me today, you look like you need it," and that simple phrase, offered without pity or condescension, struck something deep within me, like a key turning in a lock I hadn't realized was sealed shut. I took my coffee and sat by the window, sipping slowly, watching people pass by with the detached curiosity of someone who's forgotten what it's like to feel connected, and yet something in that moment, in the warmth of the cup between my hands and the echo of the barista's kindness, began to thaw the frozen parts of me, triggering memories of other times I'd been both the giver and the receiver of such acts, a smile from a stranger on a subway ride after a sleepless night, a handwritten note from a student tucked under an exam, a friend who silently sat beside me on a hospital bench for hours without saying a word, and it occurred to me how often we underestimate the ripples we create in others' lives, how a gesture that costs nothing can become the turning point in someone's story, and as the days passed, I found myself returning to that cafe more frequently, not for the coffee, but for the atmosphere, the gentle hum of life within those walls. And eventually I struck up conversations with the barista, whose name I learned was Clara, and through our brief daily exchanges I began to rediscover the small joys of human connection, the way her eyes crinkled when she laughed, the way she remembered how I took my coffee even when I didn't order it the same way, and over time our conversations deepened, moving from weather and caffeine preferences to books, dreams, and disappointments, until one evening she asked if I'd ever considered teaching again, something I hadn't done since university, and mentioned a community center nearby looking for volunteers to run evening writing workshops, and though my first instinct was to dismiss the idea, the seed had been planted, and the next week I found myself standing in front of a mismatched group of teenagers and retirees, all eager in their own quiet ways to express something real through words, and it was in guiding them that I began to find myself again, to remember that I had something to offer, a voice worth using not just for myself but in service to others, and as weeks turned into months, my world slowly rebuilt itself, not in the grand ways I once thought were necessary, no meteoric career shift, no dramatic love story, but in small, steady increments, fueled by connection, purpose, and yes, kindness. I eventually returned to teaching part-time at a local college, moved into a modest but sunlit apartment with windows that overlooked the same street where that cafe sat, still nestled quietly between the forgotten bookstore and the eternally flickering dry cleaner, and I never stopped visiting, not just because Clara and I became friends, and then something quietly, tenderly more, but because I never wanted to forget how that space, that single moment, reminded me that no matter how lost we feel, how dark the road may seem, a simple act of kindness has the power to illuminate a path we'd forgotten existed. And now, whenever I see someone sitting alone, looking as I once did, fractured, uncertain, adrift, I remember how it felt to receive that unlooked-for grace, and I make it a point to pay it forward in whatever way I can, whether that's buying a stranger a coffee, offering a sincere compliment, or simply showing up for someone when they least expect it, because if I've learned anything from that day, it's that we are never as far from hope as we think. Sometimes, it's just one kind gesture away. Thank you so much for listening. That I hope this story inspired you and reminded you of the power of kindness, even when it seems small. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to listen again, take notes, or share it with a friend who's also learning English. Take care, keep practicing, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye for now.